ZenVStyle.com. 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 ZenVStyle.com.
Welcome, everybody, to another edition of the Black Agenda Podcast. I'm your co-host, Devin Dito, along with my co-host, Adrian Guest, and we're excited to be back here with you. Today is, Saturday, April 10th, 2021, and we're back to bring you more news here. This is weekly Roundup number 12, and so we have plenty of news, as always, to get to. And before we really get into our hard news, we did want to take a moment and just recognize that we did lose a legend, in the music industry this week. With the passing of rapper DMX. And so his name was actually Earl DMX Simmons. He passed away yesterday at the age of 50. And so this was 1 week after he reportedly suffered a heart attack that left him unresponsive and on life support at a New York hospital. And so his family announced on April 9th that his organs were reportedly failing, and the rapper's family had to make the very, very, very difficult decision to take him off life support. X and his family, they say he was a warrior, who fought to the very end. And Adrian, we all kind of grew up to DMX, listening to the Rough Riders, and his music is iconic. Everybody knows that anthem when they hear it. But we lost a legend yesterday, and yes, he had his faults and his demons that he was dealing with, but it's sad to see him lose him so early at the age of 50, which is relatively young. There, but we did lose a legend yesterday. What are your thoughts on that, Adrian?
Yeah, I mean, it's always sad to have somebody that's a legend, an icon, influential leader in the Black community, especially at a young age, had a lot of, life to live, a lot of opportunity to progress the community and to help his family and different things. So definitely sad to see that, like you said, another legend within our community that, that's, gone and left us.
Absolutely. And so hopefully, now he's in heaven, with Leah and others, and we just send our condolences to his family that's going to be left behind. So very, very sad story there. So we do want to, we wanted to make sure we mentioned that because that was a huge story. A lot of celebrities, entertainers were putting their condolences, and actually interesting, putting stories out there, stories with DMX, little things that we didn't know about beforehand. But we do want to transition into our news. We do have a lot to get to. So our very first story, we're going to take a trip down to Mississippi. We've been here a few times, but there continues to be things that we need to talk about. So the story this week now, there was a comment here. So the first story comes out of Mississippi, and this is from Secretary of State Michael Watson. And he made it clear pretty much that he does not support any form of, voting reform that expands access to the ballot. And in particular, this was an interview that Mr. Secretary Watson did with WLOX last month, where he said, there's some efforts being sought out by Democrats that will register people to vote. And he said, quote, who don't want to vote or are uninformed. And here's the full quote from Secretary Watson. We'll read it for you. But essentially, he said, think about all these woke college and university students now who are automatically registered to vote, whether they wanted to or not. Again, if they don't know to opt out, then receive a mail-in ballot that they probably didn't even know was coming because they didn't know they registered to vote. You've got an uninformed citizen who may not be prepared and ready to vote automatically. That's being forced on them. He went on to say, hey, go make a choice, and our country is going to pay for those choices. So interestingly, Adrian, this is the attitude when it comes to when we try to expand access to the ballot. There are going to be those typically on the right side of the aisle who are resistant to it. And so this term woke, I think it annoys me because I don't think he understands what woke means. And I don't think most of the people who use the word woke don't understand what that means. And when you say woke college students, like we used to be college students, does that mean we shouldn't be voting because we're quote unquote woke and supposedly uninformed? Secretary Watson, in particular, when he's talking about these students being registered automatically, he's referring to part of the HR 1 bill, I believe, which is has a clause in there that would create an automatic voter registration provision. And this is actually the For the People Act. And so if the For the People Act were to become law, states would be required to automatically register eligible voters. And so these potential voters would not be forced to cast a ballot. And he made sure to point that out in his interview. But he also, like I say, he's joining a bunch of folks who have criticized the For the People Act. But Adrian, there's no widespread voter fraud in Mississippi. There was none last year. There are a few cases they're still investigating, but it just seems like there's a sense that they are afraid of, expanding access to the ballot. So just what are your thoughts on Secretary Watson's, going against the, woke voters in Mississippi, college students? And then, what's your take as far as the Republican Party not welcoming more access to the ballot?
Well, my take, we've talked about this a lot. And, whenever you're talking about this idea of, woke voters, the uninformed voter, it definitely, is reminiscent of our conversation with Miles Rappaport where we talked about, this uneducated voter, and how if you're going to talk about that, then that's an extra effort to expand knowledge about, voting, knowledge about the process, knowledge about the candidates. Because, to Secretary Watson's point, yes, there are a lot of people who don't know who's on the ballot. There are a lot of people who receive a ballot every year and they don't know, what to do with it. But to that point, that's where, you have people like Secretary Watson who should come in and say, all right, we're going to have better, maybe expand, voting access to extend the time of voting. Like here in California, they send out a lot of guides so that you can actually learn more about it. There's a ton of different websites set up. That's the opportunity that you have with this kind of stuff, because what he's talking about is just saying because someone isn't educated, they should, have their voting rights stripped away because they may not know that they were automatically registered. They may not know who's on the ballot. They shouldn't have an access to vote. And that's not the case in America. I mean, if we're going to kind of champion this freedom and champion this right, then we just need to make sure that when people get the right, they're prepared to go and exercise that right. I mean, that's one of the things that we talked about. But to your second point, the Republican Party, I mean, it's clear what the Republican Party is all about. You look at, the backlash in Georgia. I think there's some other states who are trying to do that. Even back in our home state, you look at one of the senators, Cindy Hyde-Smith. I mean, her comments about, making it harder for people to access the ballot, that's kind of the deal, the playbook that the Republican Party uses, because they know when people vote in large numbers, those large numbers typically go to more Democratic candidates than Republican candidates. So, Devin, it's just, an old part of the playbook here. And I'm hopeful that Mississippians will wake up and kind of get out of this, have some new leadership, because that's what it's going to take to kind of get out of this nightmare.
No, yeah, you're absolutely right. I think it just I don't understand the attitude sometimes, because to me, every new voter is an opportunity for you to approach them with your ideas. If you're the Republican Party, usually you can lead with your ideas. You're a politician, so you want every single voter you can get. And I thought maybe after this last election, where we saw humongous turnout on both sides, both Democrats and Republicans showed up at record levels. It showed you actually a little bit that just because it's high turnout doesn't necessarily equate to a Democratic victory. Now, yes, Joe Biden won on the federal level, but when you look at the state and local level, Republicans did extremely well in a very high turnout election. So that should have been a message, or at least a sign that, hey, we don't have to necessarily put up walls, to stop people from voting, or put up these blocks and not make it easier. We can welcome changes to automatically register people, or to send them a mail-in ballot, or just different things, or just like you say, campaigns to educate people as far as the candidates that are on the ballot, the initiatives, and different things like that. But the attitude, again, like, it just reverts back to this 1940s, 50s, 60s thinking that the only way the Republican Party can win is by limiting the amount of people who can get to the ballot box. And that should not be the attitude in 2021, with the country that's changing every single year. And we do have a larger, minority population in the country now. That can't be the attitude going forward. You have to be able to expand your ideas and approach different people who don't look like you with your ideas. You can talk about woke college students all you want to, but Republicans should be on these campuses, saying their ideas, fighting for their ideas and values. Yeah, you may be shouted down, but you have to at least try. You can't go into this mode of, well, they're woke voters, we don't want them voting. We shouldn't automatically register them. We should make it more difficult, like Cindy Hyde-Smith said. So it's just an old playbook. And look, at the end of the day, comments like this only serves to, confirm what we were thinking the entire time, which is they don't want us at the ballot box. Things have not really changed when it comes to the attitudes in Mississippi as far as the ballot box and things like that. You can say what you want, but voter fraud is extremely rare. Yes, it happens. It is extremely rare, though, when you look at the millions of votes that are tallied up every single election year. and you look at the handful of voter fraud cases that actually get tried, and there's like a conviction at the end, that happens very, very rarely. And we would not use that same attitude against guns. There's gun violence all the time. We can't even get a bill passed in the Senate or the House. Yet we're okay with passing numerous voter or election bills across the country to stop a problem that doesn't really happen that much. Like, come on, like the attitudes are totally different. And so we just have to get past this and move on to where you have to be able to run on your ideas. And the Republican Party hasn't done that in a very long time. And they're going to be at risk of just becoming obsolete if they don't try to appeal to the majority of the country at this point.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, it really speaks to our second story here, because it all kind of feeds into this idea that racism, we keep talking about it so much, but it is embedded into our community. When you look at the places where voter fraud was most popular, placed upon, there were Black cities. There were, states where they had, majority Black populations. And that's because, the American society is to peg, African Americans as being negatives. And that's not something that we can, have to continue. To lead us with our second story here, the CDC is really trying to, I guess to be like Secretary Watson, the CDC is getting woke now. To say that they're going to be addressing racism because it's a public health crisis. So the CDC director, Dr. Rochelle Walensky, said Thursday that the CDC is taking steps to address the impact of racism on public health. Dr. Walensky pointed to the impact of COVID on communities of color. And we all know, because we've reported so much on this, that COVID really hit, African-American communities much harder than white communities, even other minorities like the Asian and Latino communities. She noted that the pandemic illuminated inequities that existed for generations and how racism is an unaddressed epidemic impacting public health. One of the quotes that we have here to display for you is really, really powerful. She says that racism is not just discrimination against one group based on the color of their skin or their race or ethnicity, but the structural barriers that impact racial and ethical groups differently to influence where a person lives, where they work, where their children play, and where they worship and gather in community. She goes on to say that these social determinants of health have lifelong negative effects on the mental and physical health of individuals and communities of color. And, Devin, we've talked about this, a lot within our podcast. Our first episode was talking about looking at, racism and looking at how it's, a health crisis. And how it shouldn't be looked at as a mental illness, but something that a person is taking upon themselves to do, and how we as a society have to eradicate that. So it's really awesome that the CDC is doing something to help with this. Viewers, just to let you know what this means for the agency, they've actually created some offices and centers under the CDC to develop interventions and measurable health outcomes for the upcoming year to address racism. This is really going to be a huge priority for the entire CDC. So it's really awesome to see that. They're going to be launching a new web portal, Racism and Health, that's designed to be a hub for public and scientific information and a discourse on the subject. The site notes that racism is both its structural and interpersonal forms, has a negative effect on mental and physical health. The CDC continues to be committed to studying racism, and they're going to continue to put out some different things to help us to create a more durable infrastructure to address the disparities. So, Devin, it's awesome to see, like I said, the CDC is getting woke now. They're going to be taking an initiative to, do something on racism. How does that make you feel?
No, it's about time. We acknowledge the problems that have been happening for a while. We've been screaming about these things for a very long time. It's about time we understand that racism has many forms, and it can permeate different areas of society where it can dictate health outcomes, societal outcomes, and like she mentioned, where you work, where you play, where you live. And look, we heard this too when we did interviews, not only about eradicating racism as just like a mental problem, but also we talked to doctors from George Washington University and the University of Mississippi just about how coronavirus, the pandemic, has uncovered how societal things are now dictating the health of certain people. So you have a lot of African Americans who live in neighborhoods that are not only food deserts, but food swamps. Not only do they not have healthy food and grocery stores that they can buy from, they also have the worst fast food places available to them. So all of that plays a factor in health outcomes. And so that's what you saw with the pandemic, where you have these neighborhoods where they're eating the worst foods from the worst fast food places. They don't have healthy food to eat. They probably work a blue collar job where they may have to take public transportation, means it's kind of difficult to social distance during a pandemic or call out of work if you're feeling sick. All those things factor into what she says racism and health. And we're not saying that all of that is due to racism, but it is a fact that a lot of African American neighborhoods do not have healthy foods available. We know that when you go into a doctor's office, you're likely to be treated differently. And you can look at the fact that childbirths or death of Black mothers who go into a hospital to have their children are dying at a higher rate than any other race. And so those things play a factor. And we have ignored them for a very long time, but it's time the CDC did get woke. All the other government agencies need to wake up, as well, and understand that these problems are structural and that it's going to take a full, effort from the federal government to try to fix this. It's not going to happen overnight, but it's about time that we understand that, racism is not some abstract concept. It has very real effects that we need to start addressing.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, I remember from my days of working in Mississippi, particularly in the Delta, there were a lot of hospitals that were closing. I mean, you would have to drive a great distance to get to a doctor. If you were going to go to a specialist, even further. And those sorts of things matter because, if you don't have access to health care, that really puts you in a disposition, not to mention the fact that, wellness exams, people going in to get their regular checkups. If you don't have a doctor to go to, you can't do that. So you don't know when stuff is happening to you because you're not getting those regular tests. So really, really important for the CDC to address this. But viewers, before we take you into our first break here, we wanted to talk a little bit about the support for vaccine passports. This is a really, really interesting thing that we saw. Could be something that could be helpful to kind of incentivize people to get the vaccines. But we have a graphic here that shows about 53% of registered voters from a Hill Harris X poll said that the government should do vaccine passports. 47 said the government should not. When you look at it by party line, definitely the Democrats are more in favor of doing this. 70% of Democrats would like to have the government do this, while 6% of Republicans say the opposite. Independents are split about 50-50. The White House did come out on Tuesday and say that they're not going to do a vaccine passport system, but the Biden administration did say that private companies may push certain requirements to adopt, vaccine requirements just to kind of fully reopen and get back to normal. So maybe for private institutions, you may have to do it, but no passports on the horizon for now. But we just want to give you that little update and give you our first break here. So stick with us, enjoy the break, and we'll be right back.
What is Grambling? Grambling is growing. It's a community. Grambling is an education, an experience. Grambling is legacy, tradition, and the future. What is Grambling? Grambling is all of this and more. Grambling is the place where everybody is somebody.
All right, viewers, welcome back. Let's get into our second segment here. We saw a headline about Facebook, and obviously Facebook's been in the media a lot. A lot of tech companies have been in the media a lot, but this one is really interesting just because Facebook has tried to take a stand to say they're really good about stepping up against hate speech and hate groups. But this one organization, Muslim Advocates, are actually saying the opposite. On Thursday, they actually released a press statement saying that they're going to, suing Facebook for allegedly making false statements about taking down hateful and violent content that violates its community guidelines. They say for 8 years, the organization Muslim Advocates has reported scores of examples of bigotry and hate promoted across Facebook. It's published several reports, and it met privately with the CEO, Mike Zuckerberg, and many of their other associates. Their number two, Sheryl Sandberg, was also a part of it. They are really, really frustrated with the lack of progress. They said they've filed a consumer protection lawsuit against Facebook, Zuckerberg, and Sandberg, among other executives, demanding the social network start taking anti-Muslim activity more seriously. The suit alleges that statements made by the executives about the removal of hateful and violent content have misled people into believing that Facebook is doing more than it actually is to combat anti-Muslim bigotry on the world's largest social network. So, Devin, it's a lot going on here. I mean, like I said, Facebook is always trying to come out and say that they're really taking a stance on these things. I think the 4 years of Donald Trump and then just everyone being more politically active and aware, they've tried to come out and say that they're doing this. But one of the advocates' lawyers, Mary Bauer, is just basically saying, do one of two things: either stop lying or have your actions confirm your statements. Because they're basically pointing to the fact that when you look at Facebook, there's about 200 anti-Muslim groups on the platform. A lot of them, from what I've gathered, they don't post a whole lot, but they're still active groups. And like I said, 200, that's a huge number when you think about hate speech and you think about the potential there. Even in August of 2020, the suit had referenced an event in Milwaukee where people gathered in front of the mosque and yelled some hateful things. And we know how some things happened in Milwaukee where we got, Kenosha and things like that. So there's definitely has to be more of a role in Facebook to handle these things. Facebook did publish a civil rights audit in 2020, July of 2020, to kind of examine some of these things. But Devin, there's so many people on Facebook. I don't know how you feel on it. If you think that they have responsibility to monitor these things, or if you even think it's feasible for them to monitor all of these things. What are your thoughts?
I would say that they are responsible, but I think there also needs to be some action from Congress, from the federal level, to explain exactly hate speech and what these social media companies need to be responsible for taking off their platforms. Because that's what Facebook and these other companies are going to say is that, well, look, we need Congress to do, to dictate what is hate speech, and do we, should we be responsible for taking these things off the platforms? This has been a problem. It's not just a problem on Facebook. It's a problem on Twitter, and things like Parler had a problem with it. And yes, I think they do have a responsibility, but Congress needs to get involved to dictate the rules to which, what they need to be doing. They could probably be doing a better job, but like you say, with a platform as large as Facebook, I think it's maybe 1 billion or 2 billion people on that platform. Yes, it is going to be hard to take that content down, and so at least do it quickly. Could they do better? Probably. If you have 200 groups, obviously the Muslim advocates have been able to point out areas where they're lacking. It just may not necessarily be, top of mind right now for Facebook, because they are also looking at possible action from Congress as far as their liability for the things that are being said on their platforms. So, they need to do better. They absolutely can, I think, do better. But, with reason, we can't expect them to take everything down. But I don't think that's what the Muslim advocates are saying. But I do think this is a larger conversation just about the social media platforms and whether you can, we should treat them as public squares where you just get to say anything, or there should be hard rules, and these social media companies need to be able to dictate and to their users what you can and cannot say on these platforms. They're doing that. Some are doing it differently than others, and that's where you get these, the tension between, well, you took this person down, because a lot of conservatives say they'll pick on Republicans or conservatives and take them off the platform, but they'll allow, in this case, they've allowed 200 some odd groups that are, anti-Muslim to just be there, even though they may not be posting a lot. The fact that the content is there is still a problem. So that's where you see this unevenness. And I think some of that comes from there are no overbearing rules on these social media companies as far as what they need to do. And I do feel a little bit uncomfortable leaving the job just totally up to a company like Facebook to be responsible for for figuring out what's hate speech and what's not. I just, that whole thing it's a slippery slope to me.
No, that's, one thing you said about trying to define hate speech. I mean, whether that's Congress or some sort of independent commission, maybe more of an independent commission, because Congress doesn't get things done in a non-biased or unbiased way. So maybe we do need to have some sort of independent commission, propose some sort of barriers of hate speech for social media platforms, because I agree it shouldn't be left up to the executives of Facebook to monitor, because they may have certain political leanings to say they want certain things or not want certain things. The other thing, Devin, is that it shows that there's really no economic incentive for this kind of work, because you think about how wealthy, Mark Zuckerberg or Jack Dorsey and all these other people are. I mean, I think Mark Zuckerberg's worth, $100 billion. He took $1 billion, a percent of that, and put it towards investing and making sure that his company is really good about taking off, hate speech, taking off racist groups and things like that. Guarantee you, $1 billion of resources and funding would be, would do something to help Facebook to address it. Even though they do have so many, users and different things like that, guarantee you, if they actually took a stance on trying to eradicate some of these things, they would be able to do that. The other thing, and this is to kind of round off, I think the issue that, a lot of minorities are having right now, especially with the Asian community, now with the Muslim community, is right now there's a lot of focus on our community, the Black community, because there's been, the Black Lives Matters, there's been the George Floyd, the Breonna Taylors. And it's one of those things where I just feel like, minorities, each minority group in America is always just fighting for attention and fighting for the spotlight. We can't all just, have a seat at the table at the same time. It's like, we've got to get our issues and then we'll back down. And then the other group will fight and get their issues and they'll have to back down. And there's another group. So I'm hopeful that we can start to have a moment where people realize that it's not about, religion. It's not about race. We need to just, live together. If we're going to be a melting pot, of America, then we need to be able to live together, no matter, if we believe, more, with one group or another. So I'm hopeful that every different minority group, whether it's, race-based, religious-based, will get their day and get their due that they deserve.
No, I think you're exactly right. And yes, each minority is kind of sort of competing for attention, but everybody does deserve their moment, to make sure they bring forward the problems or issues in their communities that need to be fixed. African Americans do get, a lot of attention, and some of that is, yes, because we have been the subject of a lot of, atrocities at the hands of the federal government and people in this country. And so this is a new thing now with the what's going on with the Asian community, and the Muslim community has been having problems with this, ever since the war on terror happened. Every single person who was of Muslim, ethnicity or descent, everybody was like, but there were people out there thinking that every Muslim was a terrorist because we had stereotyped them that badly once we went, did the whole war on terror thing. So yes, it's an issue and we need to be able to come together, but also allow, everybody needs to get their moment and get their, their issues across. And Facebook, look, they need to pay attention. If this was African Americans, I would hope it would get more attention than what the Muslim advocates are getting. And so this is something that definitely, needs to be fixed. And we'll make sure to update you if there is anything else that comes out of the story. And so our next story here, we're going to go to St. Louis now, where there is, some history being made, but also a new take on when you say policing in our communities and our criminal justice system. So if you didn't know, on Thursday, well, not on Thursday, but the past couple months, St. Louis actually did elect its first Black female mayor, and her name is Mayor-elect Tashara Jones. And so she's going to be taking over at the helm, but she's bringing a very, very different, idea of what it means, for police to be in our communities. And so there was an interesting, I guess you could say, back and forth, kerfuffle, whatever you want to call it, on Fox News between Geraldo Rivera and civil rights attorney Leo Terrell. And so we just wanted to show you this clip before we get talking about what they were discussing in this. And so this is about a minute video. We'll show it to you here and we'll discuss it right after.
I find interesting about what's happening in St. Louis. You have 48% white, 45% black. And the newly elected mayor, we wish her the very best of luck with her policy. Leo, here's the question. She said, I appreciate the role of white allies in this movement of progress. I don't believe that they have the lived experience to lead a majority-minority city. Okay, so she said that. This will be an interesting social experience or perhaps even an experiment.
That is the most insulting, racist comment. You know what she's saying? She's saying, because you're white, you don't understand what we as black people go through regarding crime. That makes the assumption then that Joe Biden doesn't know. To say that she is basically in a better position because she's black is insulting, is racist, and it makes no sense whatever. I reject that argument.
Hey, Leo,
that
when was the last time you were in the ghetto? Wait a second.
Well, how dare you say that, sir? I was born. I live right near the Coliseum. That's where I was born.
I'm from Avenue C, dude.
Next to
I'm
the
from
Coliseum.
Avenue C.
How dare you say that?
That
You know
knowledge
nothing
that
about
I
me.
have is helpful.
How dare you say that?
That knowledge I have is helpful.
Insulting.
That knowledge that I have from my background is helpful.
What are you trying to drive?
Geraldo, do you think?
Let her try. Let her try.
What are you trying to
Let her try to. Let her try a kinder approach. Maybe it'll work.
All right. So as you see there, very intense, back and forth there between Geraldo Rivera and civil rights attorney Leo Terrell. But as the anchor posed the question, they are discussing this new attitude, a new idea that the mayor, Tashara Jones, is bringing when it comes to policing. So her proposed crime plan really is based around a more holistic approach to policing, a more preventative approach through social workers, drug and mental health treatment, mandatory mental health evaluations for police officers. And I guess the first question, Adrian, just in the video, the civil rights attorney Leo Terrell basically was like, this is a very racist notion because the mayor-elect actually said that while she appreciates the, our white allies, she doesn't think they have the lived experience to be able to lead a majority-minority city. And so, of course, people are going to hear that and say, well, she's saying a white person could not lead a majority-minority city because, they're not black and they don't understand, what black people have been through in this country. So that's where the tension happened there. And Geraldo Rivera essentially said, well, Leo, when was the last time you were in the ghetto? Maybe give her a chance to see if this will work. And I think he was going to say at the end, let's see if it works, because obviously what we were doing before is not working. St. Louis is seeing record levels of violence and has always had issues in the Black community in St. Louis as far as poverty and crime and things like that. So do you think she has a point, at least, when she says, those white allies may not have the lived experience to lead a majority minority city?
I think it's got some merit. I can remember from some of my Sunday school classes of how, we would say when you've been through the storm, you can come out with a great testimony about things, but you don't necessarily have to have lived through something just to be able to help someone out. It just, helps your perspective if you've gone through it. I definitely think that if you're going to be a white ally, that term, that phrase means something more than just saying that, I'm an ally. It means listening and being, an advocate, actively working to engage with the community and bring progress to the community. So I think to her point, most white leaders probably have a lot of different forces coming against them in different directions that might sway them to where they are an ally, but the black cause or the Latino cause or the Muslim cause or the Asian cause might not have as much clout comparatively to some of their PAC money and major donors. So I think what she's saying, it has some merit to it. But I mean, I would definitely think I'm not going to say, you have to be black to lead, Chicago or Baltimore or something like that. But I see her point to say, if you are black, at least you've got those lived experience to know what areas really need to be, have more attention paid to.
Exactly. Especially when you're coming from the viewpoint of the black experience, where we have tried this tough on crime approach that hasn't really worked. And so she's coming from it, trying to end what she says is like the arrest and incarcerate model of policing. Mm-hmm. She wants treatment rather than punishment for drug users, and more emphasis on social service programs to help neighborhoods, with the highest crime rates. And this is because we know usually when you find poverty, you will find crime. You will find high crime rates. And so she's trying to attack it from a different angle. Naturally, it does make a lot of people, particularly the white residents of St. Louis, very uncomfortable to hear this, because they're afraid that, the crime is just going to go wild and you can't be tough or you can't be light on criminals and things like that. But I do think a different approach is necessary. It's kind of like the defund the police discussion we were having over the summer, of just reimagining when we say the police department and what their role is and how we attack crime. We have to look at it a different way, because it's just not working. We tried this in the 90s with these extra long sentences for people who were carrying, dime bags and maybe a little weed and things like that. It did not stop people from committing these particular crimes. It just ended up with a lot of black bodies in prisons, but it did not fix the actual problem. It didn't fix the chronic poverty that you saw in these places. And so I think, hey, look, like kind of what Geraldo was saying, let's see if it works, because obviously the last 50, 60, 70 years of tough on crime is just, not working. You can lock up as many people as you want to, but if you don't fix the poverty issues that are happening in those neighborhoods, it's never going to solve itself. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy at that point, that yes, if you go into a black poor neighborhood, you're likely to find somebody that's, not doing what they're supposed to do. And so we just have to maybe look at it from a different way. And also too, Adrian, I think they were also looking at putting social workers with police officers on certain calls. We talked about, I think it was a STAR program maybe in Denver, where they were doing something similar to that and had success with it. I think that's where we kind of need to go to, and that's where she's trying to push them. And so, I think that one of our questions here was just, should more cities follow this approach? Absolutely. In my opinion, I think most cities need to try a different approach when it comes to policing. I don't know. What do you think?
I think, Devin, we're at a point to where we can see that we need to have a different approach to policing. We've seen too many videos, we've done too many stories, there's been too many reports to where the evidence is there. We've got to have different policing, and it's like we said in our interviews from the Dallas police officers, Nicole and Vincent. It's about reimagining our police department. It's not about stripping them of their ranking or stripping them of all of their funding. But it's about, like we talked about in Denver, partnering them with people who can handle, loose dogs or homelessness or people with mental health issues. That's what it's all about. That's what we're asking for. That's what the mayor-elect here is asking for. We're not trying to do anything radical. We're just trying to improve our communities. We're just trying
radical
to make
in the eyes of some people.
Yeah, radical in some people. And I mean, some cities have taken a more radical approach to abolish their police departments. But what I think, Devin, is that we've just got to have community policing. And within that, there's a lot of different layers that we have to address, so that way we don't have the issues. Because like you were saying, if there's a lot of poverty in the community, if there's a lot of unemployment in the community, a lot of homelessness, there's going to be more crime because people don't have the resources to meet their needs. So they're going to turn to something that's easy, which is stealing or something of that nature.
Mm-hmm.
So all of these things, there's a common diagnosis to these. We always talk about that, how our politicians are always just trying to scratch the surface with, taking care of these symptoms, but they're symptoms to one root cause, and we've got to address that. So I'm hopeful that we'll start to do that. I'm hopeful that, we'll start to see more new leaders, being elected who will take on this initiative to say, whatever we've been doing with police, yeah, that's great. We thank our men, who are protecting, men and women who are protecting our communities, but we need to have a better approach to this so that our communities can protect themselves and have less of a need to be policed in the first place. So, yeah, Devin, I think it's going to be an interesting thing to see out of St. Louis.
No, it will. It absolutely will. And we'll follow it, as she takes office. I think she takes office on April 20th. So she's got a few days there, Mayor-elect Tashara Jones. So hopefully she's able to kind of get that situation under control and see some real results from a new approach there to policing. And so before we go to break, we did want to mention also another icon that we lost. This was yesterday. This was Prince Philip. He's the longtime companion of Queen Elizabeth II. He passed away yesterday at the age of 99 on Friday. And so the death of the Duke comes after a period of really poor health. And so Prince Philip had actually spent a month in 2 London hospitals where he was treated for an infection and underwent heart surgery before being discharged in mid-March. And so his funeral will be held at St. George's Chapel at Windsor Castle. And then he's also going to see the bells of London's Westminster Abbey, where Prince Philip married Queen Elizabeth more than 70 years ago, rang on Friday evening in honor of him. So Prince Philip there, husband of Queen Elizabeth II, did pass away yesterday at the age of 99. And so we're going to take a very quick break and we'll be right back.
Here at Tuskegee University, some of our historical figures like Booker T. Washington, George Washington Carver, those are some of the people that created or started that Tuskegee experience.
This place is so different. You have a support system, a real support system. We may ball and parlay, but the most important thing we do is graduate. And after we graduate, we accelerate in everything we do.
All right, viewers, welcome back. Let's get into our third segment here. This is an interesting story that we saw from Fox News. It seems like Fox News has got a lot going on right now, but this is on Tucker Carlson. We've got our own opinions about him. So as we talk throughout this topic, we'll try to leave those opinions out of it. But the head of the Anti-Defamation League, or ADL, has called the Fox News host Tucker Carlson to be fired after a segment on Thursday that referenced replacement theory. Basically, the CEO has just tweeted on Friday, Tucker must go. The ADL head explained that the great replacement theory is a white supremacy tenet that the white race is in danger by a rising tide of non-whites. The CEO went on to reference Tucker Carlson's appearance on Fox News primetime when he was talking to his host about these ways that Democrats are pro-immigration. Basically, and we can go ahead and put up the quote there from Tucker where he's saying that we know that the left, we got that quote, Devin?
I did not get that.
Oh, no, hey, it's all good. It's a short quote, so I can read it there. It basically says, I know that the left and all the little gatekeepers on Twitter become literally hysterical if you use the term replacement, if you suggest that the Democratic Party is trying to replace the current electorate. But they become hysterical because that's happening, actually. Let's just say it. That's true. So basically, viewers, what he's saying here is that Democrats are pro-immigration because Democratic Party is trying to replace the white electorate because they're saying that Black and brown people who are immigrants coming into our country are inherently Democratic and automatically vote Democratic no matter what, which is not true at all. Fox News would not comment on the CEO of ADL's tweet or the similarities between what Carlson was saying and past white nationalist theories, except to point to the host comment that emphasized that this is a voting rights question. So, of course, Fox News is going to kind of duck and dodge, don't want to necessarily talk about what's going on. But the group is really pointing to the history of Carlson to really race bait, and we kind of know about some of his shenanigans. Where even in 2019, he called white supremacy more of a hoax. One of his writers even quit the show after Carlson actually used a pseudonym to go on and post some racist, bigoted remarks on an online forum. So Devin, this is really a big deal because we're going through 4 years after Donald Trump, where this whole message of white supremacy, this message of the caravans are coming in to take your jobs, take over your voting, burn down your communities. This kind of rhetoric really matters. And when you have people like Tucker Carlson, who has a major following on a major outlet, with Fox News, I mean, these sorts of wordings where you've got him talking about the great replacement, that really matters. But what are your thoughts?
I think Tucker Carlson and other people who peddle these types of almost conspiracy theories and these ridiculous lines, of saying that they're going to replace the white electorate, essentially. I think these folks, had they been around during like slavery, they would have found a way to somehow explain it, that it wasn't that bad. Like, these people are only around to create white paranoia and white fear of people who don't look like them. And the problem is the incentive structure is built for people like Tucker Carlson to go on Fox News every night and peddle these types of conspiracies because it's financially it's incentivized for him to do that. Millions of people continue to tune in because if you scare somebody, this is true. If you scare somebody, you can tell them pretty much anything. You can convince them of anything as long as you scared them to death. And that's what they have done, to the white electorate in this country, is they scared them to death of Black people, Hispanic people, Asian, well, not so much Asian people, but Hispanic people and Black people are like the boogeyman, to people in rural white America who believe that they're somehow being replaced. And this started, it used to be you couldn't say this stuff out loud. And then Donald Trump came along and made it okay. He didn't care what the media said. He didn't care what you and I thought. Not that he should, but it just, at a certain point, they couldn't say these things out loud. Tucker Carlson doesn't care because millions of people view his show every single night. So why say anything different? I don't think he's really concerned about where this country is headed to. And so he's just going to continue peddling these things, and it needs to stop. I mean, at a certain point, they could take the news off Fox and just call it Fox. It's not news anymore. They're just peddling its opinion for like 3-4 hours at night, and it's ridiculous conspiracy theories, and they're just trying to scare people and peddle the same stereotypes about Black people. They're trying to move into your neighborhoods. You don't want that low-income housing. You don't want Black people to go to the ballot box because they're too woke to do that. And then now here, the Democrats are somehow trying to replace the white electorate in the country. I mean, you would have thought Democrats are God if they could do that. Like,
they make it seem like Democrats are going down to like, Guatemala or Brazil or all these other countries and like rounding up a bunch of people and saying, hey, we got to have you coming across the border. No, I mean, that's not the case here. I mean, it's definitely nothing but fear and just pandering to a white majority who has always had, control. Generally, people who have control don't like to lose that control. And When you tell them that, hey, you've got all these people coming in, they're going to, bring your property value down. They're going to make your schools and your test scores look bad. They're going to replace all your people in your jobs. They're going to, be in Section 8 housing. You're going to hear loud music bumping all. I mean, it's just just really, really perpetuates those sorts of stereotypes. And I mean, I've tried to watch Fox News, Devin, just to try to get a more holistic, view of the media in our country, but it's just so hard. I mean, when you've got the five on and you only got, Juan Williams, like the only person that seems that seems to have some sort of fact-based stuff, and then you got all these other people like Judge Janine and all these other people who I'm like, they just seem like hacks and just like, I mean, just people who just really are just trying to sensationalize not even news, but just their opinions and put them on as news, like you just said. So I hope that the network Fox News comes out and starts doing something about their anchors. I'm glad Shepard Smith left them and went on to start doing some real news. I mean, I'm hoping that more and more of them will start to leave, or they'll fire some people, or the CEO of Fox will really take some self-reflection and say, hey, maybe we're not a news station anymore.
Yeah, I mean, they're not, again, until the incentive structure changes, they're going to continue, doing what they're doing, and they're not being held accountable. Tucker has lost numerous sponsors, and Fox News hasn't blinked. I mean, they literally said in a court hearing, I think, that people don't believe what he says. Like what he said, they literally said that. Like people who watch don't believe. They believe that the viewers don't believe anything that Tucker Carlson is saying. They said this in a court case. So that's the reason they keep him on air is because, like you say, it's fear-based. When you scare somebody, they're gonna tune in every night to hear about how Black people and Hispanics are gonna take over the world, and that's why they peddled the whole Obama was a Muslim conspiracy, and his birth certificate wasn't real, or he didn't have one. He was born in Kenya. Those things didn't take off for just any old reason. There is a slice of this country who is extremely and deathly afraid that they're going to be out of power, and that doesn't, and you can welcome in multiculturalism and we can all coexist. But obviously there's a slice of the electorate who doesn't believe, that that's true, because it has been one way for a very long time. And so change is hard, and we're just going to have to somehow convince part of this country that, look, it's going to happen no matter what you think. The country is changing, and it will be majority minority eventually, and so you're just going to have to deal with that and coexist with the rest of us. And so we just want to make sure we point that out. It was a very interesting topic and discussion. I had never heard of the great replacement theory there, and I see why. It was peddled by Tucker Carlson, which I don't watch. So our next story here, before we get into our break really quickly, this is a story about the Chinese Olympics. You may not necessarily have heard about this, but the Winter Olympics will be in China next year in February of 2022. And so China's been under all kinds of scrutiny, and they've received tons of criticism for what they're doing to a minority Muslim group called the Uyghurs, and Tibetans and residents of Hong Kong. And so they even got called out here, I think, in last month by several countries for what they did, which were abuses against the Uyghurs and Tibetans and residents of Hong Kong. And so the U.S. State Department is now suggesting that they may actually boycott the Chinese Olympics to put pressure on China to fix its abuses, its human rights abuses that they're committing in their country. And so last month, the governments of Canada, the United Kingdom, and the United States issued a joint statement accusing the Chinese government of inflicting an extensive program of repression on the Uyghur people, including detention camps, forced labor, and forced sterilizations. And so we're looking at here, possibly the United States could be joining a boycott with other countries here to put China under pressure. Whether it happens, we're really not sure. It could look three different ways. There could be what they call a diplomatic boycott, which they say is the most likely scenario, where the U.S., joins at least one other Western country in a diplomatic boycott, and that's, downgrading or not sending government representatives to the Olympics and taking other high-profile steps to deny Beijing the limelight as the host. There's a second boycott, which is the athletic boycott, which is what they're kind of discussing, which is where we could stop all athletes from going to China to participate in the Winter Olympics and other countries could join us, that could be, a little bit more teeth to it. Again, it's about a 30% probability that that's going to happen. And then also the last one there, it could be what they call a boycott light, where you see mild political statements about the games, but no formal boycott. And so it's the least likely scenario out of all of these. And so, Adrian, just, quickly, we've kind of touched on China a little bit and what they're doing, to the Uyghurs, these atrocities, really, forced sterilizations, camps, forced labor. And so we know China is a humongous economic power, but I would think some kind of boycott of the Chinese Olympics might be enough, to get them to get their act together.
I think you're right, Devin. I think when you're looking at, being a diplomat and trying to, do this with diplomacy, you've got to address all of your levers outside of military force, because obviously we don't want to go into some sort of military conflict with China for what they're doing. But whenever you're doing economic sanctions, and in this term, we've got an Olympics coming up, this could be something that would, do enough pressure on them to kind of sway things. Because obviously a country that's hosting an Olympics, man, that's a huge surplus in funding, huge surplus in tourism. I mean, we're just coming out of a pandemic, so people are going to be actually wanting to travel and go and participate, watching more. It's a really, really great opportunity for any city to gain a lot of exposure. So I would think, Devin, that if the United States and some other, major powers said, hey, we're either not gonna, send our athletes, or we're not going to give you the legitimacy of hosting the game, maybe they would, do something. But we also know that, they've got some really, really tough leaders in China. I mean, their government operates in one way, and they don't really bend a whole lot. So just hopeful that this will be some pressure that will help to kind of get the Chinese government on the right track.
No, I hope so. Like you say, it's tough. The Chinese government, President Xi Jinping, is not known for necessarily bending to Western calls to change things or do something different. We saw this firestorm erupt last year, or maybe not last year, but the year before, with the owner of the Houston Rockets put out a tweet in support of Hong Kong. And so what you saw was China banned NBA games from being showed on television in the country, which is a humongous revenue loss, for the NBA. And you saw LeBron James also get involved. So China has, enormous economic power, but so does the United States and other countries. So if we could get more countries on board, it may be enough, because this is one thing, like you say, it's one event that only happens every so often. And it's a moment for them to build some goodwill with the rest of the world, where China's in the spotlight for the, I don't know how many weeks it is, but for the Winter Olympics, you get a view into China. And so it puts them on the world stage, and you don't want accusations of forced labor and forced sterilization swirling around. You're trying to host the biggest sporting event in the world. And so maybe there's some incentive there for them to try to double check. It's tough, but it will take multiple, Western countries getting together to say, all right, China, enough is enough. And I think they have them, because it is the Olympics. This is not just a one-off event. This is something that, every country looks forward to hosting. It's not a small deal if you have, countries, boycotting it. So interesting story there of China. Well, of course, we'll always update you if anything changes. But before we go to break, we did want to give you some news out of Alabama and the Amazon union push. We mentioned this story a few weeks ago, but it looks like there will not be a union at the Amazon warehouse in Bessemer, Alabama. And so they've done the voting, they've tallied the votes, and it looks like that is the workers there at the plant rejected their effort to form a union. And so I think the final tally here was almost 1,800 warehouse workers rejected the union. 1,800 were rejecting it. About 738 were in favor. And so the retail, wholesale, and department store union, which was trying to form at this Amazon facility, says they're going to file an objection with the National Labor Relations Board, and charging Amazon with illegally interfering with the union vote. It will also seek a hearing with the labor board to determine if the results should be, quote, set aside after it accused Amazon of spreading disinformation about the unionization effort at meetings that workers were required to attend. So that story may not be over, but at least we do know now they've tallied all the votes and a union is not coming to the Amazon warehouse in Bessemer. So with that, we're going to take our last break, and when we come back, we'll have quick hits. So stick with us. We'll be right back.
Viewers, welcome back. Let's get into our quick hits here to go ahead and wrap up our show with our funny news, our interesting news, some stuff that you may not have heard of. So the first quick hit is out of Old Navy. Actually, I was going to say we, but, Devin and I, we don't really know this. But, if you are a female, you know that fashion sometimes doesn't really give you functional clothing, particularly when it comes to pants and pockets. So a first grader actually had a project. Her name is Cameron Garner. She goes to Evening Star Elementary. She was tasked with a project of writing to Old Navy to persuade them to, add some pockets to the pants. And within her letter, she had noted that, Dear Old Navy, I do not like that the front pockets of the girls' jeans are fake. I want front pockets because I want to put my hands in them. I also would like to put things in them. So cute, Devin, from a 7-year-old. Just I think of my niece London writing this too, and how sassy she would be in saying it. Her note actually reached the kids team at Old Navy, who not only responded, but they also sent her some merchandise. They gifted her 2 pairs of pants, 2 pairs of shorts, each with real pockets. So Cameron, she's the first one from Old Navy, I guess, to not have to worry about fake pockets. The company didn't really comment on whether or not they're going to, change, but they said they'll start to kind of think about this and see what they'll do. The family did appear on the Today Show to kind of talk about their experience, so that was really, really cool for them.
That was, like you said, a very cute story there with the 7-year-old. I love the letter. So our next story here for fans of Jeopardy, and maybe I think it was, if you watched Reading Rainbow, you will love this story. But LeVar Burton wants to be the new host of the hit game show Jeopardy. And it seems like he absolutely has the support of thousands of people, probably folks who grew up watching him. And so the former Reading Rainbow host has made it clear he wishes to step in as the new host on Jeopardy. And he put up a tweet here because there actually is a petition that's circulating. And so he made it clear he wants to be the host. And a fan-created change.org petition states that Burton has plenty of experience, including hosting Reading Rainbow for more than 2 decades. It also highlights Burton as an accomplished actor with credits like Shark Tank, The Next Generation, Star Trek, The Next Generation, and Roots. And his tweet here, he said, leaving this here if the powers that be are listening. He said in a tweet with the link to sign the petition. And so as of Tuesday, the link is nearing 200,000 signatures. So if they get enough signatures, you very well could be looking at Mr. LeVar Burton coming back on television as the new host of Jeopardy.
It would be great. I could see him doing that, from Reading Rainbow days. I could definitely see him doing that for sure. Now, this next story here, viewers, is really, really interesting. We don't, sometimes we like to talk about news of stuff for you to go out and participate in, but this is one we may not advocate for you to participate in because this takes a lot of effort. But after almost 30 years, Yana Williams has finally cut her fingernails. So this is about a story of a lady who hadn't cut her fingernails in such a long time. She had measured her fingernails in 2017. She had the world's longest fingernails, and they were 18 feet 10.9 inches. I mean, really, really long fingernails. Before she actually cut them, though, she actually beat that record by measuring at 24 feet, 0.7 inches. And the Guinness World Records actually measured this out because she's in their record book. The fingernails on her right hand, if you want to look at it in real particulars, they say it was on the right hand, 338.5 centimeters long. Left hand was 395.05 centimeters long. She hadn't cut her fingernails in over 28 years, since the early 1990s. She had got, it's just really, really interesting. Before she had gotten them cut, she couldn't do certain tasks. I mean, some things she could do, some things she couldn't, like washing dishes, putting on sheets. I mean, if your fingernails are, 18 feet long, you probably can't do a whole lot of anything. She did tell the Guinness World Records that she's gonna grow her fingernails out, just not quite as long as her record, thank goodness. If you do want to see the nails in person, make you a trip to Orlando. You can go to the Ripley's Believe It or Not Museum in Orlando, Florida, and you'll be able to see those 24 feet fingernails.
That's pretty insane. I will say that. I bite my fingernails, so they would never get close to that length. So our next story here is going to come from Target, the company. And so Target announced this week that they're going to be spending a total of more than $2 billion at Black-owned businesses by 2025 as part of its effort to advance racial equality. And so it's a significant increase in overall spending on Black-owned businesses, according to Target, though it declined to be more specific as far as what they do actually spend with Black-owned businesses. And so the retailer said it's going to add a broad spectrum of products from more than 500 Black-owned businesses, and it will increase its spending at Black-owned companies, of course, from marketing to construction. And so it will also introduce new resources like a dedicated team to help Black-owned suppliers scale their businesses to work with mass chains. It's the Forward Founders Program builds off Target's Accelerator Program that helps entrepreneurs. And just to wrap this up here, more than 20 companies, including Sephora, Gap, and Macy's, have signed on to a national campaign called the 15% Pledge, which aims to have companies commit at least 15% of their products on the shelves to Black-owned businesses. And so this, of course, is in line with the percentage of the U.S. population that is Black. And so Target's commitment is unaffiliated with that campaign, but you do see that this is a larger effort from corporate America to try to advance racial equality by spending lots of money with Black-owned businesses. So we definitely like to see that.
Yeah, it just makes me think, Devin, I need to, you and I need to have a product to put on the shelf so that we can go ahead and start to jump in on this 15% momentum.
I'm telling you.
Another way to make some money here is, if you're not entrepreneurial or savvy enough to develop a product, maybe you're savvy enough to sit in front of your TV and binge watch some television programs. So we always like to put out these little fun company, or rather websites, that give you fun ways to make money. So they put out this little quote here. Do you love a good before and after? Do home improvement shows inspire you? Have you spent a weekend binging on your favorite house flipping show? They say, if so, we have a job for you. This is a posting from a website called Review Home Warranties. The website is going to be paying remodeling enthusiasts $1,000. So not a whole lot, but hey, maybe it'll pay a month of your rent for just watching 10 episodes of 3 different home improvement TV shows. So for not a whole lot of effort, Devin, just sitting down, popping some popcorn, getting some chips, ordering a pizza, you can make $1,000 by just watching some home improvement shows. Applications are being accepted through May 10th. The winner will have until June 17th to complete the task. While watching, you do have to actually document the experience. So you can't just watch and just enjoy. You got to watch and do some writing. But $1,000 for binge watching 10 episodes.
Man, where do I sign up? I need to sign up for that now. So our next story here is not going to get you any money, but it probably will scare you.
Make you think you should live in Florida.
Absolutely. I know we've had a few gator videos on, but we have another one to show you. And this comes out of Florida. But this was it's a video of sheriff deputies and wildlife officers who were summoned to a Florida apartment complex. And let's go ahead and get the video rolling here.
Right there. All right, get close to him so I can go get the front.
Head held high.
Let me turn that off too. So you can see in the video, if you didn't hear, so these are sheriff deputies and wildlife officers called to a Florida apartment complex where a massive 10-foot alligator was found resting under a parked car. And the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission was also summoned to the scene, and deputies worked together with the wildlife officers to relocate the 10-foot, 2-inch reptile to an alligator farm. The sheriff's office said there were no injuries to humans or gators during the rescue. So a good all-around, gator video there. But as you can see, he is pretty massive, and they're putting him into the back of that truck there. I tell you, Adrian, every time I see one of these videos, I'm just like, yeah, Florida's not on the list of places that I ever want to move to.
I can't imagine, walking out and, looking under my parked car and seeing a 10-foot alligator. That's just got to be something, fortunately, you didn't walk up to the door and then that's when you realize it, because it could snatch your ankles at that point.
They could. But man, could you imagine you're trying to go to work and you come out and the gator's like, hey, I want to go with you. I need a ride.
Your boss isn't going to believe that story.
No, not at all. There's a gator under my car. He's like, what are you talking about? Get out of here.
Only in Florida.
Only in Florida, right? So, that's it. That's going to do it for our weekly roundup number 12. And so, again, we appreciate and we love bringing you guys the news. We try to make it funny and entertaining and interesting. Maybe you learned a thing or two, from watching. And so just to give you a heads up going forward, our next podcast episode is going to be coming out on Tuesday. And this time we're excited to have Mr. Kevin Cohey. It's a great interview. Very, very funny guy. But Mr. Kevin Cohey is going to be on. He's the president and chairman of One United Bank, which is the largest Black-owned bank in the country. And he's going to be on the show to talk to us about why we as Black folks in the community, and anyone really, you need to have a relationship with the bank, in your community. So that way we can have financial prosperity. And so we're going to talk to him about that. And of course, we do like to do our weekly roundups, but we are going to be kind of switching it up a little bit. We love bringing you, the news here with video and our pictures and things, but we're going to be switching it up. Starting next Saturday, we're going to be going audio only. So you can still hear our voices. You just would not be able to see us this time. But you can listen to us on podbean.com. We'll put out the link in the comments, but we'll be moving our weekly roundups to 1 o'clock Central instead of 7:30 p.m. Central. But it'll still be on Saturday. We'll still bring you all the news from the past weeks. We'll still have our funny quick hits and our interesting topic discussions. It'll just be audio only instead of on video and on Facebook and YouTube. So we'll be putting out more details about that. Just make sure you follow us on Facebook, and we'll definitely tell you where you can listen to us. But also, we do appreciate your support listening and watching, but would absolutely appreciate it monetarily if you could. Adrian, we'll let you know where you can give us a little bit of money.
Yeah, Devin, that monetary support is really, really key. We love to see more subscribers, more likes and shares and follows and stuff like that. But money makes things happen here in America. But but just to really tell you why, because I think I always like to start off with why, because that's important. I mean, the Black Agenda podcast, yes, we bring you engaging conversations. We bring you, thought-provoking topics, but we're really about transforming the community. We're about educating the community. We're about building something that we can bring some forward progression to our community. And in doing that, it's great. It sounds good. You write it down. It looks good on paper, but it takes money to do all of that. If Devin and I wanted to start some sort of nonprofit organization to go and talk about, building better community policings, redoing our schools or something like that, it would take money for us to lobby leaders and travel the district or whatever. And your money would help us with that. Not to mention, it takes money to make this happen. Whether it be talking the weekly roundups or talking to our guests, Zoom and Altitude and Podbean and all these things, they do cost dollars and cents, real dollars and cents at that. So all you've got to do is go to our website, blackagendapod.com, and click on the donate tab. It's really, really easy. You can start off by giving $1 a month. Really easy, really simple, very low. You'll know that your money is going to be going to something very positive and helpful for the community. But just consider that $1 a month. Go to our website, blackagendapod.com. Plenty of reasons to give. One of the other things that we wanted to start was a charity of the month sort of function, where for the month of April, our charity of the month will be the organization called Strive. Strive has a 36-year track history of serving people who face the greatest obstacles to employment. Strive helps a population seeking a better life acquire the skills and attitudes they need to find sustained employment. The majority of people who walk through their doors have no source of income, yet the majority of their graduates go on to gain meaningful employment and achieve economic self-sufficiency. So really, really great organization, especially coming out of a pandemic where jobs, we saw a lot of those being lost. And this is an organization trying to pick people up, get them in jobs, and make sure they can have self-sustainability. So donate to us so we can donate to Strive.
I like that. Donate to us so we can donate to Strive. I love it. So that's going to do it here for us here at the Black Agenda Podcast. As always, we thank you for watching, and we do have one last request of out of all the things we said tonight. We do ask that you follow us. First of all, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. If you're watching, you're halfway there. Make sure you subscribe to us on YouTube. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Also, make sure you share this with your friends, family, coworkers. So if you are on Facebook, make sure you hit that share button after you get out of here, just so that we can get this out to as many folks as possible. We're trying to get these messages out there, so that way we educate our community in the best way possible. So again, we appreciate you sticking with us here. And one last reminder, next week, 1:00 Central, we will be live, but audio only on podbean.com. We'll make sure to put out the links on our Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Again, another reason why you should follow us so you don't miss out.
That's right.
You don't miss our shows that are coming up. Exactly. You don't want to be out the loop, okay? So stay on top of everything. And again, we appreciate you watching, and we'll catch you guys next time.